Every country has its own set of laws, and to a large degree, for major crimes, you'll find that laws are, again for the most part, similar regardless of where you might visit. Murder, for example, is by and large not legal in most countries. Stealing as well, in the vast majority of countries around the world, will lead you to a heap of trouble. When it comes to smaller deeds, however, there is actually an astounding variety in the legal definition of what's right and wrong. Even between Canada and the US, you'll find a number of differences. So if you're planning to move, here are 5 things that differ legally between our two loving nations. In Canada, depending on which province you're talking about, the legal drinking age is either 18 or 19. Provinces set the legal drinking age, and most have set it at 19. The exceptions are Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec, which have set the drinking age at the younger one of 18. This is kind of interesting, as these tend to be considered some of the most conservative provinces, especially Alberta and Manitoba. In the US, there's a federal minimum legal drinking age, or the FMLD age, which was set at age 21 back in 1984. This means that for most college students, you cannot legally obtain alcohol. Of course, if you're a 40-year-old university student, you'd be okay. But you should probably get on with your life. In the US, if you're in a vehicle accident and you get out of your car and say, "Sorry about that," which is the polite thing to do, those words can be entered as evidence if the accident ends up in court. While it's generally understood that saying sorry does not necessarily mean an admission of guilt, if you have a skillful lawyer coupled with the right jury, that "sorry about that" could be legally used as an admission that you're guilty. In Canada, that can't happen. Saying sorry cannot be defined as an admission. In fact, in 2009, the province of Ontario passed the Apology Act, which essentially says saying sorry more often than not is simply an expression of sympathy. For example, if your dog dies and I say, "I'm really sorry about that," it does not mean that I killed your dog. If that Russian guy had just said sorry to John Wick, everything might have been different. After all, Keanu Reeves is a Canadian. He gets this. So I remember both opening Kinder Surprise eggs as a kid and giving them to my kids, mostly so that I can play with them. Half the fun is getting those little toys and putting them together. As it turns out, there's a law that was passed in which the United States Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act prohibits confectionery products which contain a non-nutritive object, unless the non-nutritive object has a functional value. And I guess those little toys, while super fun, aren't that nutritious. Essentially, the Act bans the sale of any candy that has embedded in it a toy or trinket. In 2017, a product called Kinder Joy was allowed in the US, and this is just a plastic egg. You open it up, and half the egg is chocolate and the other half is a toy. It's just not the same. Again, in Canada, it's absolutely fine to walk down to the corner store and pick up one of those highly non-nutritive eggs of Joy. Who said the US was the land of the free? This one is a bit tricky, and I'll admit a bit misleading, because contrary to what some people believe, you can now buy a ticket to Cuba from the US, but there are some arbitrary restrictions, like you have to choose a category of the kind of traveler you'll be. But by and large, Americans can now travel to Cuba. The reason this one is on the list is because, well, I thought that it was interesting that there were restrictions. In fact, up until May 2016, it was absolutely illegal for any American to travel to Cuba as a tourist. All restrictions were lifted briefly, but some things were reinstated again in 2017. For example, US cruise ships are currently not allowed to visit Cuba at all. But here in Canada, it's always been super common for anyone to go into any travel agency and buy a ticket for Cuba. No one has ever questioned this at all. It's super easy, almost mundane. Keeping a hedgehog as a pet is illegal in several US states. No, not that kind of hedgehog, this kind. Yep, it's entirely legal to keep a hedgehog as a pet anywhere in Canada. However, in New York, California, Arizona, Maine, or in Pennsylvania, it is illegal to own your own hedgehog. According to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, they can become pests when introduced into the wild where they don't naturally occur. And this is true. Just ask any Australian about their cane frog issue. I'm going to leave that one for you to Google. There you go. 5 things which differ in their legal definition of right and wrong between Canada and the US. And this is where I bring out the equivalent to that coffee shop tip jar. Producing these videos, as simple as they seem, actually take a lot of time. All that I ask is that you do 2 things. Like this video and subscribe. This helps us a great deal and we want to produce more of it for you. Thanks for watching. Until next time.